Welcome to our yoga class. Today we're going to put several themes together that we've been working on separately over the past few months. Specifically the spirals of the legs, spiraling the arms, and then revisiting and integrating the bandhas, Mula Bandha, Uddiyana Bandha, Halahundra, the chin lock. Putting those three together in support of our yoga practice. Most recently we've worked with the legs, before that with the spiraling the arms, but it's been a little while since we've worked with the bandhas. So we'll start with that and then integrate the other two elements in. Take a moment to get comfortable. Reach the sit bones back, tilt the pelvis forward. Lengthen up through the spine, broaden through the shoulder girdle. Sink the shoulder blades, float to the chest, and open the chest. So the three bandhas, the fourth bandha is just the first three combined at the same time. So the first bandha we'll look at is the root lock, Mula Bandha, the pelvic floor. So in this lock we lift the pelvic floor, but we'll do it with a sweeping action. We'll start at the rear and then move to the central floor and then to the forward floor of the pelvis. When you lift all three, you may feel above the pubic bone, this area right down here starting to firm up in response to the pelvic floor lifting. So the easiest way to familiarize yourself with the bandhas is to imagine that you are picking up a marble, first with the sphincter muscles. So imagine that you can pick up a marble with the sphincter muscles and then draw that up through the posterior floor of the pelvis. Now, with a lot of people, the lock is an all or nothing, like a light switch, but we want to control it more like a dimmer. So lower the marble, touch it to the floor, let it go. Pick it up without lifting it, let it go. Pick it up, lift it halfway, lift it 90% where you're working very strongly, lower it 50%, lower it to 10%, and then release it. And then try that again. Pick it up and then slowly lift up, hold, slowly lower down and release the imaginary marble. Now move forward to the central floor of the pelvis, do the same thing, drawing the marble up. Imagine drawing it up through the center floor of the pelvis, lowering it, releasing it, picking it up, lifting it, higher, lower, setting it down, letting it go. Now, an imaginary orifice just behind the pubic bone, and once again lifting the imaginary marble. Practice lifting it more strongly, more delicately. Find the space in between and then set it down, let it go. So now Mula Bandha, we'll start with the first marble and then we'll move forward from the tailbone, sweeping up to the pubic bone until the entire pelvic floor is lifting. So when you're ready, pick up your first marble. As you start to lift it, pick up the second. As both marbles continue lifting, pick up the third. Sweep from the tailbone forward to the base of the pubic bone. And as you drop all three areas firmly, notice if there's a little tightening starting just above the pubic bone. And then release the pelvic floor 2 or 3 times now. Try and do it with a smooth sweeping so the lift is smooth and delicate, and then firm, and then strong, and then smoothly release again. One more time on your own. So I find that Uddiyana Bandha, the abdominal lock, is difficult and easy to do with the wrong muscles. So it's difficult to do correctly. It's very easy to fake it and to engage in a way that isn't necessarily the correct way. So if you start with Mula Bandha, it gets you started in the right direction. So let's pick up our 3 marbles, lift the entire pelvic floor, and then as you feel that area just above the pubic bone starting to tighten on its own, start there and slowly begin to firm up the abdomen from the pubic bone up to the solar plexus, and at the same time lift the chest. So the chest lifts, and then you draw from the pubic bone up to the sternum like you were zipping a zipper, drawing a zipper up. And then release both bandhas. Try that again. Start at the back, sweep through the floor of the pelvis, jump the pubic bone, and then sweep from the pubic bone up to the sternum and lift your chest as you're doing that. And release. Now this time do it delicately. So maybe 10% effort. Delicately lift the pelvic floor, delicately firm the abdomen, float the chest, and release. This time do it 50% effort. Start delicately and then come into a firm lift of the pelvic floor and a firm engagement of the abdominal region. And release. And this time strongly. Start delicately and then firm, and then a strong lift of the pelvic floor. Jump the pubic bone, lift the chest strongly, and from the pubic bone up, zip up, and hold. And releasing. So sometimes we're called on to do a very delicate engagement. Other times we need a stronger engagement to support us. So it isn't just about turning it on and off, it's about being able to control the response of the bandha. So this leaves our Jalandhara, the chin lock, and this one can be a little tricky. We don't take the back of the head back, we take the throat back and we lengthen up through the back of the neck. Imagine someone grabbed a hair at the back of your neck and pulled up on the hair and draw your throat back at the same time. And you'll notice that the distance between your chin and your chest diminishes. So then you float the chest towards the chin and draw the base of the throat back. You can allow the shoulders to come forward slightly, not much. And then release. So you'll notice that all 3 work together. The lifting of the chest, which is part of the Uddiyana Bandha, is also part of the chin lock. Okay? So the chest connects those 2 locks together. So now let's put all 3 together, starting from the tailbone, and just a moderate. Start gently and then come to a firmness. From the tailbone to the pubic bone, then lifting the chest, drawing up through the abdomen, and then drawing the base of the throat back, lengthen the back of the neck, and hold all 3. Now, go from 50% effort to 75, 80, maybe 90. So work all 3 more strongly. And then slowly begin easing up, easing up, easing up. But don't drop. Don't let go of that last little bit. The pelvic floor is still lifted. How much less effort can you expend without dropping the pelvic floor? How much less effort can you expend without letting the belly spill? And how much less effort without letting the chest drop and the head fall forward? So now using a minimum amount to keep the pelvic floor alive, to keep the abdomen firm, the chest floating, and the chin and the back of the neck aligned. Make subtle little adjustments where some of the effort falls away, but a sense of spaciousness remains. Take a breath or 2. Now, holding on to that, we'll come into our twist, leading with the right shoulder. Take your right shoulder blade back and down, the chest lifting, cross the left hand and rotate. 4 or 5 breaths, practicing with a complete breath. One more breath. Come back to center. Switch sides, leading with the left shoulder. Crossing the right hand over. Breathing deeply. Couple more breaths. Coming back to center, circle the ribs, first one direction, and then the opposite. And roll out the shoulders. So the bandhas are particularly important when we do twisting poses. So to get a feeling for that, let's try the bandhas too strongly, and then we'll drop them all together, and then we'll find the space in between. So first, pick up your 3 marbles, but lift strongly, firm the abdomen, lift the chest, bring the base of the throat back, lengthen the back of the neck. Do all 3 strongly, and then try to rotate to your right. Notice how that feels? Come back to center. Now let go of 50% of the effort without collapsing, and now rotate. Notice the difference. Come back to center. Now let go of 95% of the effort, but don't collapse. Keep the pelvic floor lifted. Just enough effort that you know you're lifting it, but absolutely no more effort than necessary to achieve that effect. Same with the abdomen and the chest, and same with the throat. Bring the base of the neck back, lengthen the back of the neck, and now rotate to the right. Come back to center. Now drop the pelvic floor, let the belly spill, let the chest sink. Now rotate one last time. See if you can feel the difference there. Okay, good. So when we're doing our twists, a delicate engagement, or at most a moderate, somewhere between delicate and moderate, usually more towards the delicate side. Let's try the second side. Lift the pelvic floor delicately. Uddiyana Bandha. From the pubic bone, zip up to the sternum as you lift the chest. Be sure to lift the chest as you zip up. Bring the base of the throat back, lengthen the back of the neck. Let go of 90% of the effort without collapsing, and then turning to the left. 2 or 3 breaths. Back to center, circle, and reverse. And roll out the shoulders. Cat-cow. Three or 4 repetitions. And back to neutral. Now we want to take the bandhas into muscle memory so that you don't have to think about it, so it becomes more natural to you. So let's integrate the bandha into the cat-cow for 3 or 4 more repetitions. First, engage Mula Bandha, and as you do that, start to tuck the tailbone, and then as you start to round the low back, engage Uddiyana Bandha, and then as you finish with your head, engage Jalandhara, the chin. Come back to neutral, relax, release the bandhas, lift the tailbone, open the chest, look up, breathe in, and then start with the bandha and the movement of the pelvis. Mula Bandha as you move the pelvis, Uddiyana Bandha as you arch the low back, Jalandhara as you begin to arch the upper body and tuck the chin. Releasing the bandhas, breathing in, a couple more times on your own. And now improvising, and just take a moment not to worry about the bandhas or technique or form, just moving for the pleasure of the sensations you're creating. Try several different positions for your hands. Take a few breaths. A couple of symmetrical cat-cows. And then back to neutral. Lifting upright now for camel. Knees hip width. Feet spread slightly. Now start with Mula Bandha, Uddiyana Bandha, Jalandhara, and then holding on to all three locks. Slight rotation to your right. Take the right hand to the sacrum or to the heel. Float the left arm. Take the left shoulder back, take your chest forward and up. And then think about the role of these three bandhas in supporting this pose. Try to use the bandhas not aggressively or carelessly, but try to engage Mula Bandha at just the right amount to support the pose. Uddiyana Bandha, Jalandhara, all three adjusting them a little more, a little less, until they feel like they're supporting the pose rather than distracting from it. Take a breath or two. Coming back to center. One more time, engage Mula Bandha, Uddiyana Bandha, Jalandhara. Just a gentle to firm engagement, and then rotating to your left. Left hand to the pelvis or reach for the heel, float the right arm. Take your hips and chest forward and up, the right shoulder back. And then experiment with the bandhas again. Take a breath or two. And coming back down for cat-cow. Standing forward bend. Tuck your toes under, walk your hands back towards your knees, lift the knees, and then either placing your hands on your thighs, coming up a little higher, or hanging into a deeper forward bend if you prefer. Don't rush, don't push the muscles until they're ready. Start with a gentle stretch, take a few breaths, go side to side, bend the left knee a little more, straighten and bend the right knee a little more, moving the stretch from one leg to the other and back again. As you're doing this, notice how the legs are feeling, and if they feel like they're starting to warm up, if they feel like they're opening and releasing, then lean in a little deeper as you continue to go from side to side. One of the worst things you can do is to try and push the muscles to open faster than they want to. That results in discomfort, and the body responds to that by tightening down on the fascial net. Take a breath or two to finish. and then roll up. Buckle your knees as you're coming upright. Stand with your feet shoulder width. Outside edges of your feet parallel to each other. Anchor the big toes, flare little toes wide. Now from 2 weeks ago we worked with the spiraling of the legs. And actually last week was the legs and 2 weeks ago was the arms. So going back to that idea, root through the ball of the big toe, 4 corners of your heels, but lift the arch, lift the quadricep, and as you lift the quadricep, externally rotate slightly. So the quadriceps lift up and turn out, and this will open up through the front of the pelvis slightly. Okay, so that is the spiral in the legs, but you'll notice that that causes the buttocks to tighten up, the low back to tighten. So we counter that with the Mula Bandha and Uddiyana Bandha. So keep the spiral on the legs, but let go of maybe 90% of the effort without collapsing. So you're still spiraling, but with less effort. Now lift your 3 imaginary marbles, and then float the chest up as you zip from the pubic bone up to the sternum. Again, just a gentle engagement. Bring the base of the throat back, lengthen the back of the neck as you float your chest towards your chin. And then ease up until you find that you're still doing the bandhas, but you feel more natural, where you haven't dropped any of them. Now, hold on to the bandhas and come back to the legs and see if you can spiral the legs. And then engage the bandhas. The bandhas will open the back. The spiraling of the legs closes the back and the buttocks. So try to balance those 2 actions until the back feels open, but you're still working the legs. Balancing the bandhas against the leg spirals, and take a breath or 2. Vinyasa Sun Salutation. Bring your hands together over your heart. Float your arms overhead. Breathe in. And come down part way. Reach the hips back. Drop your hands to your thighs. Exhale. Bend the knees, slip the hips underneath you, and then lift up, straighten the legs, float the arms overhead, breathe in. On the exhale, release, coming down part way or a little further. On your own now. Stretching overhead on the inhale, releasing, and each time release a little further until you start to pick up a gentle stretch in the forward bend. Each time you stretch overhead, work the 3 bandhas slightly so you can feel the action, but not so much that it distracts from the rest of the pose. Two or 3 more repetitions. On your next repetition, hold the overhead stretch. Lift the left heel, flare the right ribs. Lift the right heel, flare the left, go side to side. A little bit of a back bend, just slight supported forward bend. Take a breath or 2. Either stay there or work your way further down. 4 or 5 breaths, just leaning in enough to get a pleasant stretch in the hamstrings. Stretch the exhale. Take a breath or 2. And then roll back up. Now a stronger back bend. Not going back too far though, making sure you stay safe. And the key to practicing a back bend safely, one of the major components of that is a firm to strong engagement of the bandhas. If you keep the bandhas engaged, it protects you from back injuries, especially lower back injuries. So, start with the pelvic floor, Mula Bandha. Lift your 3 marbles, then from the pubic bone, zip up to the sternum as you lift the chest. That's very important. The chest is lifting strongly as you firm up the abdomen. Expand the back. Bend your knees 1% and spiral the legs. All the leg muscles will begin to grip the thigh bone like a baby squeezing your finger, using your thigh muscles to grip the bones. Knees bent 1%, spiral. Root through the ball of the big toe, pull up and out on the thighs. Lift the pelvic floor, firm the abdomen, lift the chest. Bring the base of the neck back, lengthen the back of your neck. And all of those actions will support you as you start to go backwards. Those will prevent you from coming out of alignment and injuring yourself. Float the arms overhead. Now go back maybe 5% of what you think you could go back. And then root through the legs. Engage Mula Bandha, Uddiyana Bandha, Jalandhara, the 3 locks. Now start to work the locks, the bandhas, more strongly as you take not your hands but your shoulders back. And then arch back slightly. Knees bent 1%, spiral the legs. Lift the pelvic floor, firm the abdomen. Align your neck. And then just see how far back it feels good. Not how far back you can go, but how far back does it feel good to work into the pose. Keep lifting the chest. Take a breath or 2. Stretch up. Float the arms down. And then a half forward bend, supporting weight with your hands. Keep your back straight. Knees bent. So we measure success with our back bends by how you feel when you're doing them. They should feel wonderful. And even more importantly, how you feel when you're finished. If your back feels vulnerable, that's an indication that you may not have had the bandhas engaged strongly enough, or you may have gone back too far. Either stay here, or if it feels okay, release and lean in to a deeper stretch. 2 or 3 breaths, stretch the exhale. Take a breath or 2. When you're ready, roll up, buckle the knees, stack the vertebra. Step your feet apart for Trikonasana, triangle pose. Now, as we take our feet apart, if we take our feet too wide, our hips freeze up, and we want the hips to be able to move side to side. So if your hips can't move freely, close up your feet a few inches and try again. If they can move freely, try going a little wider until you find the widest stance where your hips still have plenty of mobility. Then turn your left foot out at 90 degrees. And then to get the back foot rotated, lift the back heel and set it down a little further out, a little wider, so the back foot is rotated in. Spread the toes on both feet. Now, start with spiraling the legs. Root through the inner edge ball of the big toe, front inner corner of the heel. Pull up and out on the thigh. Do that on both legs. Then lift the pelvic floor, firm the abdomen, align your chin, and those 3 things protect us in Trikonasana as well. Now taking your hips to the right as you tilt the pelvis. Keep spiraling the legs, keep lifting the pelvic floor, firming the abdomen, opening the chest, keeping the head lined up, and let the left hand rest on the thigh, the shin, or the floor. Now focus primarily on the left leg now. Spiral the left leg and lengthen. So it's an expanding spiral through the left leg. The right hip reaching away from the left heel as you spiral the leg. And then as you engage Mula Bandha, Uddiyana Bandha, you'll find that your low back, rather than arching, lengthens. The tailbone releases away from the shoulder blades. Now your right hand can stay on your hip, or you can extend it out from the shoulders. And then depending on how your neck is feeling, if you get the chin lock just right, you'll be able to rotate your head comfortably. This is one of the hardest positions to maintain Jalandhara, the chin lock. So if this doesn't feel safe or comfortable to the neck, reposition your head, even looking at the ground, wherever you need to be for the neck to feel safe. Take a few more breaths, spiraling both legs, lifting the pelvic floor, firming the abdomen, lengthening, releasing the tailbone down as you lift the chest up. One more breath, and switch sides. Turning the right foot out, turn the left foot in. Lift the heel, take it wide, set it down. Spread the toes on both feet. Spiral the right leg, spiral the left leg. Holding on to all of that, lift the pelvic floor, firm the abdomen, float the chest. Tailbone sinks and the chest lifts. And then taking your hips to the left, tilting the pelvis. Now, if you find this evokes a reaction in you of frustration, the level of complexity, then just pick one or two things and focus on those, and don't worry about the other things. And then over time, as you practice, you can begin to integrate more into your poses. For yoga to be really effective, we have to enjoy it. If you aren't enjoying it, then we're releasing what the yogis would call venom into the bloodstream. Adrenaline, norepinephrine, and cortisol, stress hormones. If we have the right attitude, if we're relaxing, if we're breathing, if we're enjoying our practice, the body releases honey into the bloodstream. Oxytocin, opioids. So do the best you can with the alignment, but not at the expense of enjoying your practice. Spiraling the legs, lifting the pelvic floor, firming the abdomen. Chin lock. If you want, you can rotate your head. Take a few more breaths. When you're finished, forward bend, feet wide, turn pigeon-toed. Hands on the thighs, or you can reach for the floor. Take a few breaths here. And then experiment. Bend one knee a little bit or a lot. And then notice what healthy stretching sensations can you create with one knee bent, the other leg straight. Just kind of moving and swinging the hips around or walking your hands around slowly. Switch legs. Bend the opposite leg. And then once again, just feel your way around, looking for healthy, pleasant sensations. And then try to improve on those. Take a breath or two. Come back to center. Step your feet together. And roll back up to standing. Now Virabhadrasana 2 and Virabhadrasana 1. In both poses, there is a tendency to overarch the back as you're doing the poses, and this causes problems in the lumbar region, SI joint region sometimes. And the bandhas become particularly important to protect us in those poses. We'll start with Virabhadrasana 2. In Virabhadrasana 2, if I don't engage the bandhas, this is a tendency in the pose. I'm exaggerating. And the bandhas correct that tendency. So we'll start with Virabhadrasana 2. Turn the left foot out, turn the right foot in. A little wider stance than Trikonasana. And then the key here is to start spiraling your leg while it's straight. Root through the inner edge of your foot, pull up and out on the thigh. And once you have the spiral started, bend your knee 1% and then exaggerate the spiral. And then keep bending the knee without losing the spiral. Go as slowly as you can to figure that out. Stop when the knee is directly above your heel. If this is too easy, if you don't feel like you're working yet, straighten the leg, walk your left foot a little wider, and try it again. Spiral before you even start to bend the knee. Stop when the knee is directly above the heel. If this is too difficult, close up your stance. Now, once you have that, turn your attention to the rest of your body. First, your shoulders. Bring your shoulders back directly above your hips. Straighten the back leg. Now spiral the right leg. And as you spiral the right leg, the left knee may drift forward. So spiral the left leg and the right leg, and the groin opens. Now the final problem to correct is the torso. Lift the pelvic floor, sink the tailbone, draw up from the pubic bone to the sternum as you lift the chest, sink the tailbone, float the arms, drop the shoulders, open the heart, turn just your head. Now if you can't hold on to all of those actions simultaneously, cycle through them. Spiral the left leg. Holding on to that, spiral the right leg. Holding on to that, lift the pelvic floor, sink the tailbone, lift the chest, draw the abdomen in and up, draw the base of the throat back, lengthen the back of the neck, sink the shoulders, and then go back through that again, starting with the legs, left leg, right leg, pelvic floor, abdomen, chest, head. Keep cycling through them until they're in muscle memory, and then think about doing them not as separate actions, but as one action. Take a breath or two. And switching sides. Turn the right foot out. Turn the left foot in. Swing that left heel wider, set it down. Spiral the right leg, and then keep spiraling it as you begin to bend the right knee. 1%, 5%, 30%. Stop when you're directly above the heel. Decide whether to close or perhaps widen your stance. And then one more time, bring the knee directly above the heel. Make sure that you're spiraling the right leg. Holding on to that, square up your shoulders with your hips. Straighten the back leg, strengthen the back leg, sink into the back hip, spiral the left leg, and then keeping that, spiral the right leg. Holding both of those actions, lift the pelvic floor, sink the tailbone, hollow the abdomen, float the chest, adjust your head, float the arms, sink the shoulders, open the heart, turn your head, gazing out over the right fingertips. And again, cycle through, spiral the right leg, hold on to that as you spiral the left leg, hold on to that as you lift the pelvic floor, sink the tailbone, firm the abdomen, float the chest, base of the throat back, lengthen the back of the neck, sink the shoulders, open the heart, rotating the head. And then go back to the legs and work your way back up to the head. 2 or 3 more breaths. Finish with a forward bend when you're ready. Take a breath or two or three. Stretch the exhale into a sigh. Step your feet together and roll back up to standing. Virabhadrasana 1. This will be our last standing pose. Take your feet wide, turn the right foot out, turn the left foot in. Bend the front knee. Now, very few people can do this pose and get the pelvis and low back correct and to keep the back heel on the floor. Very few people have that flexibility. So if it's a choice, my preference is to cheat with the heel and get the core right, get your back right, rather than keeping the heel on the ground and twisting and torquing the spine. So when we lift the back heel, this turns it into a balance pose, so you have to pay attention to your balance. So try that. Lift the right heel off the ground. Now slowly begin to rotate your hips until you're facing with your hips, not your head, but your hips are facing straight ahead, lined up with the left foot. Now once you've rotated fully, bend that front knee a little bit, straighten the back leg, reach through the back heel, sink the groin, put your hands on your front thigh. Now, Mula Bandha. And as you lift the pelvic floor, let the tailbone sink and then zip from the pubic bone up to the sternum as you draw back in the abdomen. Lift the chest. Now the left leg is spiraling slightly, but here we want to really emphasize the bandhas. Then bring the chest up, float the base of the neck back, lengthen the back of the neck. Holding on to all of that, float your arms overhead. Take your shoulder blades back, your chest forward and up, shoulder blades back and down. If your mind wanders, go back to Mula Bandha. Start with the pelvic floor, work your way up to the neck, into the head, and the shoulders. Take a couple more breaths. Sinking the tailbone, zipping from the pubic bone up to the sternum. When you're ready, switch sides. Turn the right foot out, turn the left foot in, bend the right knee. Float the back heel so you can fully rotate the pelvis. Once you've rotated, begin to straighten the back leg, reach back through the back heel, place your hands on your thighs, and then Mula Bandha, Uddiyana Bandha, Jalahandra. Start with the tailbone. Pick up the 3 marbles sequentially. Sink the tailbone as you're doing that. Zip from the pubic bone up to the sternum and lift the chest. Bring the base of the throat back, lengthen the back of the neck, lift your chest towards your chin, sink your hips towards the floor. Float the arms overhead. And begin to work the pose. So as you bring that left hip forward, reach the left heel back and down. Cycling through, pick up your 3 marbles, firm the abdomen, float the chest, shoulders back, shoulder blades back and down, chest forward and up. 3 or 4 breaths. When you're finished, standing forward bend. Support. Weight with your hands on your thighs. Start with a half forward bend. Give your low back time. Give your back time to release, and if it releases, lean into a deeper stretch. Coming down to your hands and knees. Roll up your blanket tightly. Remember, you can unroll it partially or roll it up further if you want a more advanced stretch. Start with the roll under your shoulders, arms extended. You can support your head with your neck, with your hands, or you can extend and let the head release. Breathe deep and relax into this. Every 5 or 10 breaths, reposition by lifting the hips, pushing yourself over the top of the roller an inch. Set the hips down so that over the next 3 or 4 minutes, the roller works its way down to the pelvis. Remember, if it gets intense, unroll your blanket enough that you can relax comfortably. On the other hand, if it gets too easy, roll your blanket up a little thicker. We'll go for 3 more minutes. Finished a little early, just go back and start over. Take a couple more minutes. Ten or 15 more breaths. When you're finished, lift your hips, remove the roller. Now, keeping your hips off the ground slightly, see if you can lift one foot off the floor. Bring the knee into your chest, and with your hands, draw the knee in until you feel your low back lengthen and the tailbone point towards the ceiling. Then set your low back on the floor and bring the other knee up to your chest. Rock side to side. And then take a breath or two. Next we'll work with bridge. But we'll place our emphasis, our attention on the spirals and the bandhas. So before we do that, just a quick explanation about setting goals. So take a moment to relax. So one of the keys to progressing is especially with complex actions, is to be able to place your attention in one specific area and then release that, place your attention in another specific area and not be distracted by the first one. The problem is goals are sticky. They're like tar babies. So once you have one goal, it can be difficult to set it aside in order to focus on a new goal. You'll find when you aren't realizing it that your mind goes back to the old goal and starts trying to achieve it. It hangs out in the subconscious mind long after you think you've let go of it. I see this again and again and again in myself, but also more easily you see it in other people. It's harder to see it in yourself. So in this case, if you've done bridge before, you already have an idea of what bridge should be, how far you should come up, what it should look like, what it should feel like. And while we're doing it with the focus on the bandhas and the spirals, they're going to interfere with that. And so you have to be very clear in your mind to let go of your old goal, whatever it was, and then prioritize what is important today. And today what I want you to focus on is the spirals in the legs and Mula Bandha, Uddiyana Bandha, Jalandhara. And then don't worry about the rest of the pose. Get those right. And then do the best you can with the pose itself. So starting from your back with your knees to your chest, rock. Then bring both feet to the floor, hip width, outer edges parallel. And then we start with the spiral in the legs. Root through the ball of the big toe and lift the arches. As you do that, you'll feel your quadriceps engaging a little bit. Now, pick up your 3 marbles, and you should feel the tailbone come off the ground slightly and the low back press into the floor slightly. Now zip from the pubic bone up to the sternum. Move your chest towards your chin, lengthen the back of your neck. And then holding on to all of that, begin to lift your hips a little bit and hold. Once the hips comes off the ground, it makes a little bit more sense to spiral the legs. You can feel that action a little bit more. So root through the inner edge of the feet, lift the arches, spiral the legs. Draw the 3 marbles up as you lift the pelvic floor. Zip, release the tailbone away from the shoulder blades. And then continue rolling up. Keep the back of the neck long, drawing your chest towards your chin, and then stopping wherever you're comfortable. If you get fatigued, come down whenever you're ready to. If you're doing okay, 5 or 10 more breaths. As soon as you start to feel like the spirals and the bandhas are making sense kinesthetically to the body, you're welcome to work the pose a little bit more strongly, as long as you're building the pose around the spirals and the locks. When you're ready to come down slowly, stop before your pelvis touches the floor. Find your balance and see if you can lift one foot off the ground. Hug that knee into your chest, set the kidneys down, hug the other knee in, rock side to side. One more time. Take a moment to relax. Find the floor with one foot and then the other. Feet hip width, outer edges parallel. Root through the inner edge of the feet, lift the arches, begin lifting the pelvis, spiral the legs. Mula Bandha, Uddiyana Bandha, Jalandhara, starting from the pelvic floor, working your way up through the back of the neck, and then continuing to lift into the pose. But again, measure success today by the spirals and by the bandhas, not by how high you lift the hips or any other measure of success you used on a previous
workout. Prioritize the bandhas and the spirals. Do the best you can with the rest of the pose. 2 or 3 breaths. When you come down, stop just before the hips touch. Lift a foot, hug the knee, set the kidneys down, hug both knees, rock side to side. Coming over onto your hands and knees. Downward facing dog. Now in down dog, we're going to bring the arms into this. So we're going to start off spiraling the arms. Bend the elbows 1%, root through the knuckle of the index finger and squeeze the elbows towards each other. Straighten the arms without losing the spiral. The wrist spirals in, internally, and the armpits spiral out externally. Keeping that, tuck the toes, lift the knees an inch, reach your hips back, keep spiraling the arms, draw your chest through, float your shoulder blades away from your feet as you draw your chest towards the feet. Spiral the arms. Now bend the left knee, straighten the right leg, spiral the right leg. Bend the right knee, straighten the left leg, spiral the left leg. Go back and forth. And then try to spiral both legs. Spiral the arms. And then begin adding Mula Bandha, Uddiyana Bandha, Jalandhara. If you can't do all of that simultaneously, cycle through. Spiral the arms, then spiral the legs, then work the bandhas, and then go back to the hands, back to the legs, back through the bandhas. Keep cycling through until it begins to make sense how to do them all simultaneously. Take a breath or two. Cobra. Coming down onto your stomach. Any version, any variation. Give yourself a nice workout for the back muscles. 5 or 6 breaths. One last down dog. Spiral the arms. Holding that, spiral the legs. Holding that, work the bandhas. Now try to hold all of those, but emphasize the arms. Hold all of that, emphasize the legs. And while doing everything, emphasize the bandhas. 2 or 3 breaths. Pigeon pose. When you decide you're ready to start slowing down. Leading with the right leg, coming forward. Sliding the left leg back. Find a comfortable position. 5 or 10 breaths. Stretch the exhale. 2 or 3 breaths. Downward facing dog. Your last down dog for the class. Pigeon pose on the second side. Start with a gentle stretch, take a breath or two. And then work your way deeper. Two or three breaths. Roll onto your back. Do a moving twist. Bring both knees to your chest. Take your arms horizontal, press the palms down. Lengthen the back of your neck. Keep your knees closer together to make this more challenging. Spread your knees a little wider to make it easier. Swing your knees to the left, turn your head to the right. Keep the right shoulder on the floor. Stop before your right shoulder starts to lift. And come back to center with the legs. Take your legs to the left or to the right, turn your head to the left, keep the left shoulder blade on the floor. Come to center on the inhale, rotate to the opposite side on the exhale. Working with the breath. 3 or 4 more repetitions. One more time either side. Again, keeping the knees together. If you need more action. When you're finished, hug both knees, rock side to side. And take a moment to get comfortable for Shavasana. The knees can be bent, supported with a blanket under the knees, or straight. Lengthen the back of your neck. Sink the back of the neck to the floor as your head slides away from the shoulder blades, and the shoulder blades draw away from the head. Turn the palms up, extended at an angle away from the hips. Make any little fidgets or adjustments until you're satisfied. Then, with an exhale, begin the process of letting go. The face, the neck, the shoulders, the arms, the hands, the fingers. Feet, the ankles, the calves, the knees, the thighs. Loosen hips, relax the buttocks. Low back the belly, the kidneys, the ribs, the chest, the shoulders. Back of the neck and soften the throat. The jaws, the lips, the tongue, the mouth. Tip of the tongue, the belly, and root of the tongue. The cheeks. And especially the eyes, the eyeballs, the space behind the eyes. Eyebrows and forehead, the temples soft and hollow, the scalp and the crown. Now imagine spiraling the legs and engaging the bandhas. Don't actually do it. Imagine that you're doing it. Imagine that you're doing it so strongly that it begins to feel like you're doing it, even though you aren't. And then, with an exhale, let go of the imaginary effort. And return your attention to the breath, rising and falling.
slowly, lazily. Yawning, stretching. Rolling to one side. Take a breath or two. And then pushing up to a comfortable seated position.
I'd like to thank you for joining me for today's practice, and then recommend this idea of spiraling the legs, spiraling the arms, and using the bandhas, not just in the poses that we looked at, but there are many poses where the bandhas can support you. All the standing poses, almost all of them, the spirals in the legs support you. Anytime you're carrying weight on the arms, down dog, handstands, forearm stands, the spiraling in the arms will become more important to you. And I do know how challenging it is to learn these things and to integrate them in. It does take a lot of work, but in the long run, it pays off in dividends. I'd like to thank you. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I look forward to practicing with you again sometime soon. Namaste.